The sun blazed over the bustling fairgrounds of Riverside, Ohio, where thousands had gathered for President Donald Trump's rally. American flags fluttered in the breeze, chants echoed across the grounds, and the energy of the crowd vibrated in the hot summer air. Security stood firm, and a raised platform draped in red carpeting overlooked the massive sea of people. Amid the noise and celebration, a woman in her early 30s stood alone at the barricade. Her name was Maria Sullivan. Unlike those around her, her expression wasn't filled with excitement or joy. Instead, her eyes held a quiet sorrow and firm resolve. Dressed in a simple navy blazer and modest dress, Maria clutched a folded American flag, the same one she had received a year earlier. At her husband's funeral, Officer Daniel Sullivan, a devoted local policeman, had lost his life responding to a domestic disturbance call that had spiraled into tragedy. Since that day, Maria had become both a widow and the sole parent to their 5-year-old son, Tyler. As President Trump stepped onto the stage, Maria's heart beat heavily in her chest. For her, this rally wasn't just about politics or public spectacle. She had come here with a message not just for the president, but for the entire nation. Clutching the flag tighter, she braced herself as the crowd erupted in cheers. Secret Service agents surveyed the gathering carefully, constantly alert. Maria drew in a deep breath. She didn't yet know how, but she was certain that today someone needed to truly listen, not to the cheers, not to the applause, but to the deeper truth of what it means to move forward after losing someone who gave everything. She edged closer to the barricade. Her gaze locked on the stage. What she was about to do would alter everything. Her fingers quivered slightly as she opened her purse and took out a plain white envelope. Inside was a letter she had rewritten over a dozen times by hand. It wasn't meant to be political. It wasn't filled with blame. It simply told her the truth that had been buried beneath headlines, debates, and distractions. The letter began, "Dear Mr. President, I'm not writing to accuse, but to remind. My husband died in uniform, and a piece of me died with him." Maria had attempted to send the letter before, once to the White House and once to her congressional representative. There had been no response. Maybe it had been overlooked. Maybe it never reached the right hands. But today, she wasn't willing to wait any longer. She watched as Trump spoke about the bravery of law enforcement, about patriotism, about sacrifice. Maria didn't doubt his intentions. She believed he meant what he said. But words were easy. Living in the echo of those words after the loss was much harder. As agents scanned the crowd, she moved closer again. She raised the envelope high. A volunteer approached, trying to guide her back, but Maria didn't step away. Instead, she spoke with quiet strength, words that would soon be heard across the country. "Mr. President, I'm the widow of a fallen officer, and I have something I need to say." For a moment, the crowd went still. A hush rippled through the rally. Cameras turned. Trump stopped mid-sentence. Thousands of eyes turned toward Maria. Everything around her seemed to pause. Even the wind grew still. President Trump raised his hand, signaling the Secret Service to stand down. He looked at Maria, calm and steady, yet clearly moved. A staffer leaned in to speak to him, but he waved them off. He stepped down from the podium. Maria, her hand still clutching the envelope, stood frozen. She hadn't come to cause a scene. She had come because she could no longer carry the weight of silence alone. Her voice wavered, her eyes glistening with tears. "Mr. President," she said gently, "my husband was Officer Daniel Sullivan. He gave his life to protect others. Now our son has to grow up without him." Trump nodded solemnly. "Come forward." The crowd fell into a deep, reverent silence as Maria was gently escorted onto the stage. She wasn't seeking attention or sympathy. She simply wanted someone to understand. She handed him the letter. "I wrote this months ago," she explained. "I tried to send it. Maybe it was meant to be spoken instead." The president accepted the letter, visibly affected. This was no campaign moment. It was a deeply human one. As he unfolded the page, a stillness settled over the audience. He read it aloud, without fanfare or prepared remarks. "When Daniel left for work that day, he kissed our son and promised to be home for dinner. But dinner turned into a flag ceremony and a lone bugler playing taps." The audience listened, in frozen silence. "We honor heroes, but forget the ones they leave behind. We cheer at parades, but don't hear the emptiness left in our homes after they're gone." Trump paused, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm not here to blame anyone. I'm here because my husband believed this country was worth protecting. I need to believe that, too, for the sake of our child." Soft gasps and quiet sobs rippled through the crowd. Trump folded the letter gently and turned toward Maria. "This," he said, "is something everyone needs to hear, not just me." There was no political spin, no party rhetoric, just truth, raw, unpolished, and real. As Maria stepped away from the microphone, the audience remained silent. There were no chants, no slogans, just deep, collective reflection. A man in the front row discreetly wiped away tears. A woman clasped her hands and whispered a prayer. Even the most devoted supporters saw Maria not as a disruptor, but as a grieving woman standing in strength. Trump returned to the microphone. "Sometimes we forget the real price of courage. We talk about heroes, but Maria lives with that sacrifice. Every day." He asked for a chair to be brought for her. She sat quietly, still overwhelmed by the moment. She hadn't come for a spotlight. She had only hoped to be heard. Backstage, the press captured every second. Social media caught fire. Police widow speaks at Trump rally trended within moments. Support flooded in. Some demanded reforms. But most importantly, the country was listening. Maria's voice had broken through. That night, news channels replayed the scene over and over. It wasn't her politics that struck a chord, it was the raw, honest grief. People across the country felt her words in their bones. Maria returned home to her modest house in Ohio. Unbeknownst to her, her voicemail had filled with messages of their widows, retired officers, strangers all calling to thank her for saying what they'd long kept inside. At 3 a.m., her son Tyler climbed into bed beside her. "Mom, did Daddy hear you today?" he asked softly. She hugged him close. "I think so, sweetheart. I think the whole world did." And for the first time in a year, Maria felt Daniel's presence again, not just as a memory, but as a renewed sense of mission. The White House later requested the original copy of her letter for their archives. Maria kindly declined. "It doesn't belong in a folder," she said. "It belongs in the hearts of people who still need to hear it." Instead, she posted the full letter on a blog she'd once created in Daniel's honor. Within 2 days, the site received over 3 million views. Messages poured in. Widows, families of the fallen, people grieving in silence, they all wrote. They told stories of birthdays missed, anniversaries passed alone, and children growing up with only photos. Maria read every message, cried with many, and responded when she could. She realized she wasn't alone. This was their story too. And perhaps she could help be their voice. 3 days later, Maria got a call she never expected. "Maria, this is Donald Trump. I'd like you to come to Washington." He invited her to speak at an upcoming memorial service for law enforcement officers, not as a political figure, but as a mother and a widow willing to speak the truth. Maria was nervous. Public speaking had always scared her. But grief had taught her a deeper kind of courage. When you've lost everything, you learn to speak from your soul. She practiced in front of the mirror. Tyler gave her a proud thumbs up. Her speech wasn't about numbers or laws. It was about moments. Christmas without Daniel. His boots still at the door. Tyler asking, "Do they have police officers in heaven?" She wasn't looking for applause. She wanted people to feel what sacrifice truly meant. The memorial was held at the National Peace Officers site. Rows of white chairs stretched endlessly. Blue ribbons fluttered in the breeze. When Maria took the podium, her voice trembled. But slowly, she steadied. "I'm not a politician. I'm a woman who loved a man in uniform." 410 unforgettable minutes. She spoke with the clarity and honesty only grief can summon. "Please," she finished, "don't just thank them. Stand with them. And when they're gone, stand with us." Thunderous applause erupted. Maria didn't smile. She simply bowed her head and whispered, "For you, Daniel." Within a week, donations to police, family charities soared. Lawmakers introduced a bipartisan bill, the Sullivan, ACP, providing expanded benefits and counseling to families of fallen responders. More than legislation, something deeper changed. Hearts. Maria was invited to schools, churches, and community events. Her story softened even hardened opinions. She had become a symbol not of sides but of turning pain into purpose. One evening, Tyler asked, "Mom, do heroes get lonely in heaven?" Maria swallowed hard. "Maybe, but I think they feel us when we remember them." "So Daddy heard your speech?" "I believe he did." Maria appeared on national television. She was hesitant, but agreed, hoping her words would reach someone in need. "We won't always agree," she said on air. "But we can all agree to honor sacrifice, not just with words but with action." While sorting Daniel's belongings, Maria found a journal she'd never seen. Inside were notes he'd written after long shifts about life, duty, dreams. One entry read, "If something happens to me, tell our son I served with pride. And tell Maria she made me braver every day." She clutched it to her chest. It was the strength she never knew she still had. A nearby school renamed itself Sullivan Elementary in honor of Daniel's service and Maria's voice. At the dedication, she stood holding Tyler's hand. Tears streamed down her face. A legacy was growing not from fame, but from truth. A year after the rally, Maria visited Daniel's grave with fresh flowers. She whispered, "Your letter changed more than I imagined." Nearby, a stranger approached. "Are you Maria?" the woman asked, eyes misty. "I lost my husband last year. Your story saved me." Maria embraced her. Sometimes the deepest comfort isn't advice, it's being understood. Trump later returned to Riverside and asked Maria to introduce him. The crowd gave her a standing ovation. She kept her remarks short. "Last year, I stood here with a folded flag and a broken heart. Today, I stand with hope. And that's because of all of you." The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was reverent. Maria launched a nonprofit called After the Sirens, supporting the mental health of first responder families. She never sought recognition, only change. And change came quietly, slowly, through empathy and grace. At a school assembly, 6-year-old Tyler was asked about his hero. "My dad was a police officer," he said proudly. "But my mom's my hero too, 'cause she never gave up." Maria wept in the back row. Grief had given her a mission, and love gave her the strength to carry it forward.